Okay. How long? We just said that in order for her to trigger the process of Sotah, she has to be seen b'stira. According to some shittas, you need 2 edim for the stira. How long do they have to witness this stira for, this yichud for? Zoktamar kadei bia. Now this shaila of how long is a yichud, that's not only the gabi Sotah, it's again nowadays. The Isser Yichud is only an Isser Yichud up to a certain amount, after a certain amount of time. For instance, if Moshe Paskins that you're allowed to be alone in an elevator with a woman, right? If a woman walks in the elevator, you have to jump out. It's only if there's a certain amount of time involved. So Zok to Gemara, the amount of time would be to be metama. How much is that? Kedei bia, the amount of time it takes to make a bia, and not a full bia, but rather kedei hara. Hara, Rashi says, is not a full penetration. It's neshigas aver ba'isamakim. It's touching the aver to that place, and that's how long it takes. And the Gemara is going to explain why we went through why we go through 3 steps: kedei tuma, kedei bia, kedei hara. Now, how long does that take? Zokt the Gubraisan, there are like many different ways to time it. So the first sheet that we have is Kedei HaKafas Dekel. It takes the amount of time that it would take someone to walk around a dekel tree. Divi Rabbi Yishmael, that is the shita of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kedei Mezigas HaKais. In those days, they weren't able to drink pure wine. It had to be diluted. So the amount of time that it took to dilute the wine in a becher, in a kais, the amount of time that it takes to drink a kais. The amount of time that it takes to roast an egg. Now Rashi tells us the 4th line from the top. The Gemara is going to tell us shortly where do these shiurim come from. How do they get to the shiurim? All of these tanoim timed how long it took them, and based on how long it took them, that's the shiur that they came up with. So the Gemara is going to ask soon, how can we say that Ben Azai tells us that it takes him? We know Ben Azai did not he wasn't married. So how could he have been able to make that calculation based on his own experience? Rabbi Kiva Omer, is the amount of time it takes to swallow an egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Besayer Omer, the Gemara is going to clarify that, because the Gemara is going to bring another brisa that's going to be soiser some of these tanoim, and then the Gemara is going to figure out. That's a very good point.
What are they measuring? As long as it takes to what?
To do a hara.
And what is that exactly?
It's putting the aver in that place and pushing on it a little bit. But we're soon going to see in a minute that it's not quite exactly that. And the last sheet of Rabbi Meir is Sholish Beitz and B'zuach Chazu. Oh no, there's more. But before we do more, let's look at Tosfos. Tosfos, the top Tosfos gets very graphic. Kamashir Stira B'Yushalmi. It tells us that Kol Al Shurin Achar Atosiner. This is after she's already undressed. If besides the time it takes for the woman to remove her covering, after that, how long does it take for the hara to occur? So I'm not sure how exactly each one timed it. Like while they were doing it, they asked somebody to run around the tree, or while they were doing it, they asked somebody to roast an egg. But apparently, that's what these are the different activities that they used to time it. That's not what Rashi says. Rashi says, "Kol echad ve'echad min chamalalu ba'atzmai shir kama shahu shoya b'harasai." Could be. Now, one of the things we have to ask is why didn't they just tell us how many dakos, how many seconds? Why?
Okay.
So we're soon going to see that there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of variables. For instance, the Gemara is going to get into a question as follows: when you're miyachid with a man, right? Or if a man's miyachid with a woman, boom, they're jumping right into it. He has to seduce her first, so that takes a longer time. So maybe you need more time. So the Gemara is going to discuss that. Okay, Rabbi Lezer ben Yirmiyah Omer Kedei Likshar Gardi Nima, as someone who's a weaver. So he's used to doing it. How long it takes him to tie a thread that tears? A regular person, it could take a little longer. A gardi is someone who's a weaver, so of course he could do it much more quickly. Chanin ben Pinchas Omer Kedei Shetoshit Yoda L'Soich Pia Litel Kisam. The amount of time it takes a woman to put her hand into her mouth to pull out a splinter that she might have in between her teeth. Palima Omer. The amount of time it takes to reach out and to remove a kikar from a basket. Even though I don't have a clear raya to the timing of putting your hand into a basket, there's a remes from the psukim to tell us that the shear is the basket. Because of an isha zayna to a kikar lachem. I'm sorry? Back to Gemara. Going back to the top, the kamashir stira, kede tuma, kede bia, kede hara. Why did we need such a description? Say kede hara, and then we know the share of the ra. Zaktamar trichi. The tana kede tuma. If the brisa would have only said kede tuma, I would have thought kede tumasa bartzusa. It takes time first for him to seduce her, and then it goes to the Maisa. So you might think that they have to be secluded together for an amount of time that it takes the seduction as well. That's a considerably longer time. Meaning, maybe these people who are being chayte, they might have had a relationship already for a long time. So they might be ready to go for it. So you don't have to wait so long that he could be marat to her. Maybe she was already marutza from before. And Lagabi Yichud as well, Moshe Paskins, that the amount of time that you're allowed to be miyachid with a woman that you have a familiarity with, who you're friendly with, is much less time. The Easter is much less time to spend together than with a total stranger. Because with a total stranger, until an Easter can occur, it takes a little bit of making a connection. But if it's someone who you're very familiar with, their avada the Isser Yichud would be for a much shorter time. Kamash Shalon Kedebia. Kedebia tells you it's extra because it did not say anything more than Kedei Tamasa. Kedebia tells you that it's only the time that it takes to do the actual bia, not the time that he's maratzer. Vitana Kedebia, but if it only said Kedebia and Kedei Tamasa, Havamina Kedei Gemarbia, the amount of time that they have to be secluded together is the time to do a Gemarbia. Kamashal Kedei Hara, only a Kedei Hara. The Yashmin Kedei Hara, so why didn't it just say Kedei Hara? And Havamina Kedei Hara Vartzusa. If it only said Kedei Hara, that it wouldn't have known that it's only Kedei Hara, not the amount of time it takes to do the seduction. Kamashalon Kedei Tuma. Therefore, it said Kedei Tuma to tell you, so you need Kedei Tuma and Kedei Bia, which together tell you that you don't need the time of Ritzui. The time of Bia alone is enough. And what type of Bia is it? It's the Bia of a Hara. The Chamach Kedei Hara, and how much is the Kedei Hara is Kedei HaKapas Dekel, and then you have a whole list of Tanoim offering different timing for the same Isser. It means a regular dekel. Yes, a couple of seconds. It's not a lot of time. We're a mini back to Gemara. So we've had a list of Tanoim with different timings based on different activities. We're going to bring a brayta that quotes the same Tanoim that have different examples of timing. We're mini v'nistira the kamashir stira lo shaman. We don't know clearly. Yeshu Omer vi nitma, have Omer kedei tuma, kedei bia, kedei ara, kedei chazar estekel. Divi Rabbi Eliezer. Now, in the first brisa, it was Rabbi Yishmael who said kedei akafas estekel. Here, Rabbi Eliezer is saying kedei chazar estekel. At this point, the Gemara thinks they're both the same. Divi Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua Omer kedei mizikas hakais. In the last brisa, Rabbi Yeshua said kedei l'shtoisai. Here, Rabbi Yeshua says kedei mizikas hakais. That's one of the steers that the Mishnah is going to ask. The Gemara is going to ask. Benazi Omer kedei l'shtoisai. What did Benazi say in the last brisa? Kedei l'tlois beya. Rabbi Kiva Omer kedei l'tlois beya, and Rabbi Yehuda ben say Omer kedei l'goyma. Kasol kedaitich. The Gemara assumes here hainu akafas dekel, hainu chazaris dekel. Also, the first brisa, Amar Rabbi Yishmael kedei akafas dekel, upalag Rabbi Eliezer Allah. And Rabbi Eliezer argued on Rabbi Yishmael, and he said kedei mizikas hakos. And hacha Amar Rabbi Eliezer kedei chazaris dekel. So it seems like the same. And for the Gemara, no, kedei chazaris dekel is different than hakafas dekel. Amar by hakafas beregel, the amount of time it takes to walk around a normal sized dekel. Chazara means baruch. Chazara means if a big wind comes and blows a dekel over, the amount of time it takes until that dekel bounces back and straightens up in its position. Boy Ravashi, Chazara baruch. That we say that Chazara's dekel means that the amount of time it takes for the dekel to bounce back after it was blown over in a windstorm, does that mean it was blown all the way this way and it bounces back? Or the amount of time it takes for the tree to bounce back and forth until it finally settles in one position, which of course is a longer period of time. Dr. Marteku. Now let's look at another steer. Hasam Amar Rabbi Eliezer in the first bride, Rabbi Eliezer said, Kedei mizigas hakos. And Hacha, he said, Kedei chazar dekel. Dr. Gemara, it must be that the same amount of time that it takes for a dekel to move back and forth is the amount of time it takes to be mizig hakos. I guess depending who he's talking to. That's a good point. Why he used different examples. Now, after the wind stops and it's displaced, how much will it bounce back? In the first brisa, Rabbi Yeshua said the amount of time it takes to drink a kos. And Chaim asks, does that mean meziga with drinking, or does that mean just drinking? And for the Gemara, it's not a stira. It meant both, like what Chaim said, that the amount of time it takes to dilute and then drink the wine. Why do you have to answer that it means both? Maybe Rabbi Eliezer holds, or maybe Rabbi Yeshua holds, that it's the same amount of time it takes to dilute a kos, that's the same amount of time it takes to drink a kos. Like we said earlier, in the other shitas. Why do we have to say here it means both? So because it became Rabbi Eliezer, because then he holds the same thing as Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer said in the first brisa, Kedei mizikos hakos, and we know they don't agree. So in the first brisa, Benazi said, Kedei litzlois beya, the amount of time it takes to roast an egg. The amount it takes to drink a kos. The same amount of time it takes to roast an egg, that's how long it takes to drink a kos. In the last price, Rabbi Kiva said the amount of time it takes to swallow an egg. He means both. The amount of time it takes to roast an egg and then eat it afterwards. Why didn't we say that Rabbi Kiva holds they both take the same amount of time? Because that's what Benazai said. In the first bride, Rabbi Ben Beseira said, and Hacha, he said, to eat one egg. Dr. Gemara, really what Rabbi Ben Beseira holds, it's the amount of time to eat one egg. When he said it's the amount of time it takes to eat 3 eggs, with the Devar of Rabbi Kiva Kamar, he was asking a kasha on Rabbi Kiva. The Amar, we explained according to Rabbi Kiva that he means the common Meshayim b'tzliya u'b'gemiyah. Because we had a Steve and Rabbi Kiva, and one Bryce said tzliya, and the other one he said gemiyah. So we said Rabbi Kiva holds that the share to do two different activities: roasting an egg and eating an egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Besair told Rabbi Kiva, why don't you just stick to one activity and say, "Ei mashir gemiyah lechudah k'dei legameya shalosh beitzim zuach chazu the hainu tzliya gemiyah." Why put together compound two different activities to give us the shear of the stira? Why not just use one activity, but in order to fill that time, say swallowing 3 eggs? But that wasn't really Rabbi Yehuda ben Besair's shita. His personal shita is the amount of time it takes to swallow one. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yirmiyah Omer, Kadesha Yikshar Gardinima. So the amount of time it takes for a gardi, a weaver, to tie a thread together, which generally is much faster than a regular person. So Boy Rav Ashi, the Mechak and the Mikra, were the two ends of the thread right there, and then he just ties them together in a snap, or does it mean the two threads are far away and he has to first gather them together and then tie them? So to Gemara, Teku, we don't know. Chanin ben Pinchas Omer Kadesha Toishet Yoda l'Seich Pia Little Kisen. Bo Rav Ashi, this splinter that she's going to pull out of her teeth, the mahadik, is it's stuck in between her teeth, where she'll have to work at it to get it out, which will take a little bit more time. Or if it's just loose, which will take much less time. Teku. By Rabashi, the mahadik, is it stuck in the basket where it will be hard to get out? Or maybe it's going to come out easily, it's not tight. Is it a new basket that has little ends of their reeds sticking out, which would further a delay in pulling it out? Or is it an old one where there's no rough edges and it would be easier to extract the bread from this basket? Bechamima is it warm bread, which takes long because warm bread will fall apart in your hands. Is it cold bread, which will come out much faster? B'dechiti oy b'desari, is it wheat bread, which Rashi says is smoother, so it slides out faster, versus barley bread, which has bumps in it that would make it more difficult to pull the bread out of the basket? B'rekicha, is it soft bread? Oy ba'akusha, is it hard bread? And rekicha, Rashi says it was baked out of a batter or a looser type of dough. That's softer, it'll come out easier. Or if it's hard bread. And then all these shilos of tomorrow take, we're not sure. So we were never given an answer in minutes. And the answer to that is because sometimes it does vary. Amr Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Amr Rav Yochanan. How do we know this? Rashi didn't make it up when he told us on Amud Aleph that they measured how long it took themselves. Rather, kol echad ve'echad ba'atzmai shir, as Rashi says, how long each person via their personal experience, that's what they were sharing. Highly personal information. Break the Gemara, how could that possibly be? Ben-Azai never got married, so he couldn't have been sharing his personal experiences. Zok Gemara, there's 3 options of how Ben-Azai could have known. Could be he got married and then he separated. And there are those who ask, Ben-Azai said, I want to get married, and he said, have a wonderful day. Let somebody else be busy with Puri Ravu. I can't do it. Since when can a Talmud Chacham say, I don't do the mitzvahs? I'm absolved from doing the mitzvahs. I can't, I'm learning. You're not allowed to do that. There are those who say that Ben-Azai was an oinus. He simply couldn't get his mind off of Torah. So he found he couldn't perform properly because his mind wouldn't leave Torah. He was an oinus. But he did do it once, so therefore he was able to share that timing. Probably while he did that via, he wasn't even thinking about his wife. He was busy timing it. So he realized that marriage is not for him. He probably think, oh, finally I'll understand Pshat in the Mishnah. He says, that's why you're interested in me, because you want to know Pshat in the Mishnah, right? Iba Yisema, not of a Pirishava. Iba Yisema, may Rabbi Shmuel, or his Rebbe taught him how long it takes. Iba Yisema, Soid Hashem Lireyo. Hashem shares secret with those who fear him. Now, the Mepharshim tell us that this cannot be Ruach HaKodesh. Because HaTorah, Loy B'Shamayim. You cannot paskin Halacha Shaila based upon a Ruach HaKodesh. So it must be HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes ways for people to find out things and to get them information through other means. Darash Abavira. Okay, so tell us that when we're done. Darash Abavira. Zimnin Amar Lo Mishmei Rabami, V'Zimnin Amar Lo Mishmei Rabas. Sometimes Rabbi Vira would say this in the name of Rabbi Ami, and sometimes he would share it in the name of Rabbas. And he said the following: if someone eats without washing, eats bread without washing, that's compared to being Baal Isha Zoina. Because of an Isha Zoina until a Kikar Lachem. Break the Gemara. From that pasuk, you shouldn't see that eating a Kikar Lachem should be like an Isha Zoina. Because then you should have said, Ki ba'ad Kikar Lachem Isha Zoina. Because of the Kikar Lachem, it's like you were Boil Isha Zoina. It doesn't say that. It's because of Isha Zoina, you're like eating a Kikar Lachem. So Amar Rava, Hai ba'ad Isha Zoina, Ad Kikar Lachem, would have should have said ba'ad Kikar Lachem, Ad Isha Zoina mi Boil. Hello, Amar Rava, I disagree with your limud from the pasuk. Rather, I'll say Kalabal Isha Zoina, someone who's mizana, l'soif mevakish Kikar Lachem, he's eventually going to become poverty-stricken, and he'll have to look for something to eat. Amar B'zik, Amar B'Lazar, Kalamazalgal B'Nitil Shadayim, Nekar Min Ha'olam will be uprooted from the world. So let's just stop here for a second, because Tosfos asks, Teima L'ri, L'Pirish Rashi, the Pirish, the Oiver Al Divei Chachamim Chayiv Misa. Why do we say that it's like he was Baal Elisha Zoina or Nekar Min Ha'olam? It's because he was over on Divei Chazal, the Rabbanan made a Zera that everybody should wash. Why? Because of the Amunah that they had. Kohanim have to wash before they eat Truma. Because you die, Maraskani is saying, and there's a Gzeira until you die. And the Baal Kohanim have to wash before they eat Truma in order that we should be used to it. So when Mashiach comes and we'll have the Paraduma and Kohanim will eat Truma, it'll be already, people will be used to eating that way. So therefore, everyone has to do it. So we're leading our lives basically in anticipation of a Chakaloi B'chol Yom Sheyavai. But if that's the case, well then Afilu Kol Devei Chachamim Nani. Why do they pick B'dafka Netilas Shadayim for Tosfos? Anything where they're over on Devei Chachamim should be Nekar Min Ha'olam.
Isn't it just for Kohanim?
No, we wash. Everybody washes Netilas Shadayim because of that.
I know, because of what exactly?
Because the Kohanim have to, so they made a Gzeira that everybody has to always wash before
They should have made a Gezer just for Kohanim.
They said they decided to make a Gzeira for everybody so that the Kohanim would be used to also washing at all times. They saw the need to make everybody have to wash. The Oid Kasher Tosfos, the Amar Halcha, the Oid Shei Misa, here it says Nekar Min Ha'olam, which sounds like it's Isra Misa for violating Divei Chachamim. Ubeperek b'ma'isha yaitza are meaning the Oid Shei Aniyos. So Tosfos answers Venira the Zilzul Shemizalzul B'Tamid Oid Shei Akira Idenius. In fact, violating Divrei Chazal once does not lead to such a harsh oynish. It means if someone makes light and disrespects in general Gzeres of Chazal, that's someone who will be inflicted with Akira through poverty. Zaktois the Kasha Mimisa Ayidei Nachash. It's worse to suffer with poverty than it is to die because of a snake bite. The Nekar Min Ha'olam. Okay, so that's Tosfos' pshat, and what Nekar Min Ha'olam is not like Rashi, that for violating Netilas Shadayim, even once someone dies, it means someone who's dismissive of the Takana of the Rabbanon on a regular basis. He has a disrespect for the Takana of the Rabbanon, he will become poor. Okay, Gewaltig. Omar B'chi Barashi, Omar Rav, Mayim Rishonim. When we wash Mayim Rishonim, people say, some Chassidim say, so Hashem, we pick up our hands when we wash Mayim Rishonim. Torach Shiabiya Yadav L'mayla. Mayim Achronim, when you're washing Mayim Achronim, Torach Shiyashbil Yadav L'matay. You keep your fingers down. and we're going to soon see why. Tanya Nami Hachi. You know why? Because the way it works is when you wash your hands, you're supposed to wash until your wrist. So when you wash your hands until your wrist, the first dump of water is matari your hands, but the water becomes tamei. And the second washing is matari the water or rinses off the tamei water. What would happen if you held your hands straight or down and you, on the first wash, you went a little bit extra. You went past your elbow. I'm sorry, past your wrist. If you went past your wrist, that means all the water from your fingertips until your wrist are tamei. And if you pour the second and you only pour until your wrist, that means the little bit of water that was past your wrist never became Torah. If your hands are leaning down, that water will then drip back down onto your hands and be matami your hands. But if you keep your hands up, then you never have to worry, because any water that's past your wrist will only drain down your arm and it won't be matami your hands. So that's what the Brisa says. Tanya Nami Hachi, Hanoitul Yod of Turk Shek Bi Yod of Lamaila. Why? Shema Yatsu Amayim Chutz Leperik. Maybe the first wash, which renders the water tamei, you'll wash past your wrist, and the part of water that's in your arm you will not cover with the second netila, and then that water will drain down to your hands. But if your hands are held up until they're dried, there's no chance of water from below your wrist climbing up to above your wrist. Now, Rashi tells us that when you're washing my machronim, the purpose of that is to get the melech sedaimis off your fingers. So there you want to keep your fingers pointed down, so anything should drip off your fingers. If you eat pas, you wash your hands, but you don't dry them. That means when you eat the bread, it gets wet and mushy and not appetizing. It's as if he ate lechem tamei. Shenemar v'yomer Hashem kacha yoichlu b'nei Yisrael es lachmam tamei. The pasuk is discussing Rachman Litzlon, what's going to happen to the Yidden if they do Averis. And one of the things that it talks about is lachmam tamei, which refers to dirty bread. They would have to use as fuel to bake their bread. Human feces, it would make their bread disgusting, and the Torah refers to that as tamei. So when you use a wet hand to eat bread, it also makes the bread not so nice, and that word, the word that Torah uses to describe it is tamei. And as a matter of fact, Rav Moshe Paskins, do you have to wipe your hands with a towel? What about an air dryer? Are you allowed to dry your hands when you're washing the tilo shadayim for bread? Are you allowed to use an air dryer? Dr. Moshe, since the whole reason why you need to dry your hands is just so that you shouldn't make the bread wet, so you surely can use an air dryer, not on Shabbos. Maybe the mitzvah of Negiva, maybe you have to dry it with a towel. Because it's dry there. Correct. Umay, maybe you wouldn't, maybe you would, but Moshe gave us clarity. Umay ve'eshes ish nefesh yikar sotzim. The words of an eshes ish will capture a precious nefesh. Or will hunt and capture a precious nefesh. What does this mean? Kol adam sheyesh by gasus haruach. A nefesh yikara is a best of the mensch. Someone who has gasus in him, someone who carries arrogance in him, that arrogance is going to cause him to be nichshal in an eshes ish. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, ve'eshes ish nefesh yikarisas. Amar Rava said that doesn't fit into the Lashon pasuk. Hi nefesh yikara. It's not nefesh yikara. It should be nefesh gavaya mibayli. Yikara means precious. Gavaya means haughty, arrogant. V'oid he sotzad mibayli. What it should say is nefesh yikara he sotzad. The nefesh yikara will be captured. It's mashma here that the eshes ish will capture the nefesh yikara, not that the eshes ish will be captured by a nefesh yikara. Ela Omer Rava, kol haba eshes ish. If someone Rachman Litzlon is born a Eshes. I feel Lama Torah. Even he learned Torah, he has the schus of Torah. Where it says regarding someone who learns Torah, which is about the Torah, it's more precious than gems. So Nefesh Yikara is someone who has Torah in him. Even if he has Torah in him, and he's so good, he's considered like a Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol shenichnas lefnai ulefnei. I'm sorry, more precious. He's more precious than Kohen Gadol, and Rashi tells us because Kohen Gadol, Amoritz, and the Talmud Chacham takes precedence. So even if someone is in such a high madrega, al Talmud Chacham, if he's Rachman Litzlan Nichshal in the Eishajish, he Sitzudenu Ladina Shal Geinam. She will capture him to bring him to Gehenna. Somebody who has within him arrogance, that's like he did avodah zarah. Tzivacha tayavas Hashem call goyva leif. The goyva leif is tayeva to Hashem, and the word tayeva is used to describe avodah zarah. Uksevasam avelisavi tayeva al beisecha. Rabbi Yochanan didei amar, and Rabbi Yochanan, my Rebbe used to say, "Laisavi tayeva al beisecha," meant a television. So according to him, someone who is a gas ruach is worse than someone who's not even avodah zarah. He's like somebody who has a television in his house. It's even worse. Rabbi Yochanan didei amar kilu kafar beikar. It's like he was kafir in the Rebbeinu Shalom Rachman Litzlan. Shenema v'ram levavcha. One will become haughty and balgaividik. That's going to lead someone Rachman Litzlan to forget the Rebbeinu Shalom. Amar, it's kilu ba al kol harayis. It's as if someone was ba al all the arayis. That's how repulsive gaiva is. Sivacha tayavas Hashem kol gaiva leiv. Hashem hates all gaiva leiv. It's the tayeva. Vazam he has kol hatayevis el. All of these tayevas. Ula Amar kilu bana bama. It's as if you built a bama lavodah zarah. Lavodah zarah. Shenemar chidu lachem. Cut off your relationship. Cut yourself off. End any relationship you have. Adam asher neshama ba'apoy. From a person who has a neshama in his nose, meaning he's haughty. Ki bameh nechshav. Because what is he worth? But we say al tikri bameh. What is he worth? Elabama ki bama nechshav. We consider him like a mizbeach la'avodah zarah. Anyway, all these different comparisons, it's not good to be a balgaiv. My yad liad lo yinaka. Yad liad lo yinaka is the end of the previous pasuk that we quoted. So let's look inside. It says in the pasuk. Toyavas Hashem kol gava leiv, and then it says yad liad lo yinaka. Hand to hand will not be knocking. What does this mean? Amar Rav, and I'm going to read the Bach's Girsa and Rashi's Girsa. Kol gavoya leiv, kol sheyesh boy gasus aruach. Rashi's Girsa. Kol sheyesh boy gasus aruach. If someone's a balgaiva, afilu hikneu lakadosh baruch hu shemayim v'aretz. Even if he was makna to the Rebbeinu Shalom shemayim v'aretz, kavram like Avram Avinu, it doesn't mean he gave a kadosh baruch hu shemayim v'aretz. Kadosh baruch hu created. It means he gave a kadosh baruch hu credit for making the shemayim v'aretz. He and our Kens, he recognized the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Chsiv Bey, it says about Avram Avinu, Hari Moisi Yodi, I'm lifting up my hands, El Hashem, Kel Elyon, Koine Shemayim V'aretz, even if someone is such a maimin, but he's a balgaiva, Lo Yinoka Medina Shel Gehinim. That's right. So even though he, and I can't ask him from the Eibishter, but a balgaiva, even if he's a balgaiva, still yad liyad, if he's going to be like Avram Avinu, who said, Hari Moisi Yodi, Lekel Elyon, still lo yinaka, it won't save him, because he's a balgaiva. Kashu l'dvei Rab Shila, it shouldn't say yad liyad if it's referring to Avram Avinu, ha yad liyad lo yinaka, yad yodai miboile, because it's referring to the Avram Avinu, who's at Hari Moisi Yodi. So it shouldn't say yad liyad lo yinaka, it should say yad yodi lo yinaka. Even if your hand is like the hand of Avram, where you said, Harimaisi Yodi, Ella, Amri Reb Shila, it means, Yad Yad means, Afilu Kiba Torah Kamosh Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu got it in the Yad Hashem, even if you're Makabal Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu, the Chsiv Bey, Mimina, Eish Das Lamoy, nevertheless, Lo Yinaka Medina Shal Geinan. But again, that doesn't stay with the pasuk, because it should say Yad Miyad. Moshe was Makabal the Torah. He didn't give it away. Kashal Rabbi Yochanan, Hay Yad Liyad. What's up is Yad Miyad Miboyle. Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu Oysa Tzedakah B'Seiser. Even if you're such an Erlich that you give people tzedakah matan b'seiser, so then you're giving it miyad liyad, from your hand to the hand of the oni, which dashed him with the psukim. Tichsiv, it says in the pasuk, the ksivba matan b'seiser yichaf af, it'll overcome, it'll subdue charoinaf, giving tzedakah overpowers charoinaf. Still lo yinaka midin shel geinim. So in short, gaiva is a very bad thing. It will overrule Torah. It'll overrule Ma'asim Tovim. It'll overrule acting like Avraham Avinu. Gaiva is a very dangerous midah. Okay, Be'ez Hashem will stop here, and Be'ez Hashem will continue tomorrow. Shkoyach. So you said you have a ma'aser.